Hello, everyone. I'm Marche Dickerson. Thank you for joining us. I am the business assistant for iSeek Solutions. And today we have Chris Kraft, who would discuss the entrepreneurship war between business practices and professional development. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to throw it right to Chris. I hope you enjoyed today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marche. I appreciate it. She's been so wonderful about getting all of this together for us today. Welcome to this webinar series that iSeek Solutions has been doing. I'm very excited that you can join us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And I'm very excited about the subject matter today because it's really been on my heart a lot recently. And you got to excuse me, I'm doing my best to multitask here and pull this up. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be continuing iSeek Solutions series that they've been doing on winning in 2021. And as soon as I press present here, winning in 2021, I believe that all of us ultimately want to win in our particular business. Now, what that looks like in our particular business is the reason that iSeek Solutions exists in the first place. They are a consulting company and an organizational company who their ultimate goal of what they want to do is to help you succeed at what you're trying to do. And what I really want to encourage you to do is, first of all, reach out to them on their website, reach out to them on their email. Go and email Marche and email Annie on some things that they're trying to do. And I do apologize. I'm having some trouble with my computer and with my PowerPoint. So I'm actually going to stop sharing and I'm just going to speak to you like this. And I do apologize for that because I know how important that I know how important these days it is to be able to view something and to be able to be interactive. So I'm going to speak a lot with my hands today, right? Because when you have technical difficulties, guess what? You just got to jump in and go. So here's what I want to encourage you to do today. As I go through, if you have any questions, especially now that we don't have video, right? I'm going to encourage you to ask a question in the chat if you'd like me to clarify a point. If you'd like me to go ahead, if you have any questions, I'm going to spend some time answering those at the end. But I want to speak to a subject that is very, very important in the business landscape today. And that's cultivating win-win relationships between businesses and between entrepreneurs. Whether it's a startup, whether it's a small business or a business franchise, there seems to be an internal war inside organizations, and the gap seems to be getting larger. And I'd like to speak to that today and see what we can do about closing the gap. In today's social media immersed culture, the world is obsessed with buzzwords. And I think you'd agree with this. Like FOMO, fear of missing out, has become, it's become a focus of advertising and market experts. How can I draw the most people with the right words in my advertisements? This is the idea of clickbait. Make a picture or make a phrase or a question that's so appetizing that someone will click on it or listen to a webinar or attend a seminar. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with this idea, the idea of having specific buzzwords or specific things that are quote unquote more important than others, it's kind of spurns a couple of poor business practices that have to be considered. One of the business practices, and this is really where I want to spend my time on today, is the dichotomy, the separation between certain business ideas. Because we tend to cubbyhole certain business ideas and we turn the world into an either or culture instead of a both and culture. And I just want to speak to that for a moment because like this is a coffee cup, right? This is a cell phone. Though there's not much that they can do between, like this is an either or situation. If I want coffee, I'm not going to here unless it's to buy coffee. I mean, that makes logical sense, but there's not much these two things can do for or with each other. But that's not the way that most of our businesses are set up. There are ways that we can genuinely help each other, even if we are as different as cell phones and cups. We don't have to cubbyhole what we do, who we are, and our business practices inside. We don't have to separate them to the point to where one is right and one is wrong. This does not have to be an either or culture. And I almost feel like it's become that there is you're either going to have to choose red or blue, right? Even staying out of politics, you're going to have to choose the Green Bay Packers or the Chicago Bears. You're going to have to choose the Alabama Crimson Tide or the Auburn Tigers. You're going to have to choose atheism or Christianity. It's become two sides that are either or instead of both and I want to do my small part today in helping end this war, or at least helping close the gap. So let me come back to my notes, because I'm really passionate about this and I can speak about it and I can go off on tangents, and I don't want to waste your time. I want to respect your time. There's been a clear delineation, a line drawn in the sand, with personal and professional development on one side and specific business practices and activities on the other. Here's just an example. One person is doing a teaching, and there's a large conference that I was invited to speak at this year, and they had to do it this way. And before I go into this, I don't want to speak poorly about the idea of speaking on different things, but I think you'll get my point as we go through this. One person is going to speak on the agile practices in Alabama's small business sector. That's best practices. That's activities, that's application. Another person is going to speak on the value of RLA, reading, listening, and associating. That has more to do with personal and professional development. Now, in many seminars that I've attended, these ideas are actively presented as different paths, as having very little to do with one another. And it's common sometimes even for books and audios from popular speakers to laud one side or the other and tend to downplay the other side. Even if it's unintentional, we've created an either or culture in this respect. Now, again, I'm not saying that every business does this or every company does this, but I believe that it's a business practice that is dangerous when we begin to cubbyhole things and say, well, I'm going to become a master in this. I'm going to become a master in this. Yes. And we're going to talk about this in a moment. Malcolm Gladwell does talk about you're going to have to choose what you're going to be an expert in, because it takes an average of 10,000 hours of focused study and practice to become a master in anything. But the really important thing to remember here is that if you're going to be strong in one area, you're going to have areas of weakness in another. So the first thing that we all need to do, regardless of if you're a startup, a small business, a B-type business franchise, according to Kiyosaki, is we need to understand that if we're strong in something, we need to align ourselves with association with other people in our lives who are strong at the points we're weak at. It doesn't have to be a competition one to the other. Again, it's the danger of cubbyholing specific things. It's almost become two sides of a religion. Do you believe in best practices and specific application? Or are you a believer in personal and professional development? And the believers in each side of the war tend to edify the importance of their own side and tend to, well, that's just professional development. We're agile. Or why do you need to go focus on all that agile? Why don't you just become better? And it almost becomes an either or culture. And this is the point. It doesn't have to be either or. This does not have to be a war. It's not supposed to be a war. But because of the culture that's been created, it's becoming that way. And I simply want to wave the warning flag and go, hey, this can be a both and. Instead of this being a war, I believe it can be breathing in and breathing out. I believe it can be the left hand and the right hand. It can be two sides of the same coin. So although I don't have enough power in one webinar or in half an hour of influence to stop this war, because it's worldwide, I would like to stand on my soapbox here and share my 2 cents with you. My specific goal here is not to bash either side, because that's what people seem to almost be doing today, or at least that's the attitude. I want to raise the importance of both sides. Some of us on the call are really good at current business practices. We've got all the letters after our name. We are fantastic at keeping up with the latest trends. But maybe we can't find the time for Kaizen, for consistent improvement, right? Maybe we just can't find time in our schedule because our schedule is so full of specific application of principles. While others on the call may be students and great learners, but possibly we've fallen behind the current trends and practices that are most applicable in our particular business realm. And that's all I want to do. So let's start here. And again, I wish I could share my slides with you. I apologize that the PowerPoint's messing up, but I'll repeat these a couple of times so you can get them. Here's my first point, and I only have 2 real major points. First of all, professional development without best practices is irrelevant. Professional and personal, we'll include those 2 together. Personal and professional development that does not have best practices is irrelevant. Here's the key phrase here that I want us to remember. Knowledge, and we've heard this before, I believe, knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. See, there are many theoretical sages in the world that would love to, and many times do, spread their opinion onto the canvas of the business world, but they have very little practical experience in applying what they've learned. An example of this is I heard a speaker recently that said that he was really excited to go learn marketing and advertising and entrepreneurship from a business professor at a well-known college. If I said the name, everyone would know it. And he went into the professor and said, "Professor, I'd love to hear some of your business practices." And the business professor, teaching on business startups and entrepreneurship, had never owned a business or helped start one. So again, not even a criticism, just going, you may have all the knowledge in the world, but you still need to apply. So I tend to be one of these people who love to learn, love to read. Some people I've heard have a bad practice of having a fake background with books that they haven't read. I've read the vast majority of these, and the ones I haven't read, I can't wait to go read. I'm a voracious reader and learner, but I tend to fall here to where I'll fall behind on the best business practices. And I'm simply encouraging you, if that's a habit of yours, it's time to increase the importance in our lives and the recognition that I need to be up to date in all of my business practices. Again, my purpose here is not to put down anyone who's a consistent learner, but without any type of application, the knowledge dies with us. Here's a statement I have underlined in my notes. Practical application of principles is where real change occurs. I'm going to read that one more time. Practical application of principles is where real change occurs. This is why it's vitally important to study best practices, to continually improve your craft, to learn new applications and apply the latest innovations. The original intent for what we today consider buzzwords, was focused on application. Where can I learn the newest trends? And how can I apply them to my bottom line? Today, it's just become corporate speak. We have these words that we don't even have, half the time, we don't even know what they mean. We just say them because it makes us sound smart. We'll throw them into a resume or into an interview, right? So my point is, the point of cubbyholing things is to make sure that we're not missing anything. The goal of learning trends and techniques should not be considered competition to personal and professional development. Again, the real goal should be a left hand and right hand approach, breathing in, breathing out. And I would relate application or best practices to breathing out, how to apply what you take in. So best practices, again, they're not in opposition to professional development. They complement each other. In fact, when you think about it, you can really only apply after you learn. So if this is you, if you kind of have a habit of, I'm a really big learner, but I'm not really up to date on some of the newest. I know a lot of people who, as soon as Agile came out, they said, I just want to stay in my comfort zone. Well, maybe there's something there that you should do a little increase, just a thought. Maybe just staying in our familiar zone of learning and what we're comfortable with. Maybe it's time to branch out and try something new when it comes to application and best practice. So that's my point number one, is personal and professional development without best practices is truly irrelevant. You've got to apply the knowledge. Here's number two, and it's very simple. Best practices without personal and professional development are hollow, or you could put shallow. Best practices without personal and professional development are hollow, or they're shallow. And here's my one-liner here to go along with this. Best practices are principle-based. Any best practices you find are usually not because, I think this would be fun, and they just do it. Normally, it's based on a consistent standard. It's based on principles. So learning those principles through personal and professional development is vital. It's vital. 21st century America is rediscovering the importance of systems. of systems. But just having systems isn't enough. I've committed the last 10 years of my life to learning about business systems and how to apply business systems in every area of life. I actually apply systems, and I almost call them business systems, in my marriage. Because when I apply systems in my marriage, guess what? They're based on principles. Best practices in my marriage are based on principles. Best practices in my staff at work are based on principles. Best practices in my diet are based on principles. So I'm going to give a few examples and quote a few books that will hopefully be an example of what I mean. And I have all of these in my PowerPoint that's not working. So if you have any questions about this, you can feel free to reach out to me at the end of this. I have my email. I can send you a list of book suggestions of some of my favorite in some of these areas, but I'm just going to read some lines and then I'll tell you the name of the book and the author that has it. So here's the first one. If I have a business where I'm the magic and the success of my business is based on my time and energy, that's a poor system. It's the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. I want you to think about that. Is your business system set up where you're doing everything? You're the magic. Without you, nothing gets done. Without you, the money stops. Without you, the communication stops. Maybe you should do a little learning into business systems on the personal and professional development side so you can apply those into your best practices. Next is The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. If I have a business where people are not learning, if they're not with me, that's a poor system. I'm going to read that again. If I have a business where people are not learning, if they're not with me, that's a poor system. You need to have a system where your people are learning and professionally growing themselves. The book Resolved by Orrin Woodward says, if I'm part of a big business, then without worrying about the character or integrity of the leaders, that's a poor system. If you have a large business, or even I would argue any business, and you're not, I'm not going to say worried, if you're not concerned, if it's not on your radar, the integrity and the character of the leaders, it's a poor system. Personality Plus by Florence Littauer says, if I have a business that is only based on my knowledge, my experiences, my temperament, and my thought process, it's a poor system. Chris, what's your point here? My point is a system is a best practice. I think we would all agree with that. But through personal and professional development, we can learn the principles that are foundational to this best practice. Left hand, right hand, breathing in, breathing out. These things are not at war with each other. Our business world has turned into a chase for the newest without application of the best. I'm going to say that again, because I think this is a really big key. Our business world has turned into a chase for the newest shiny object without application of the best. The book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling, long title, by Frank Betjer, says sometimes the best practices are centuries old professional development principles that we aren't actively applying in our business today. And speaking of that, guess what else? Guess what other book I'm going to quote? 1936, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Because sometimes the best practices are people skills from a book that's taken for granted today. There's an old principle that says, and it comes out of a really good book, it says you can't put new wine into old wineskins or else the old wineskins will burst. Many of us are trying to squeeze best practices into old wineskins that can't handle it. And that's my encouragement for us today, is if you're really good and really up to date, you know all the corporate buzzwords. And please, I don't mean that in a negative way. You know the current trends and what's going on today. My simple question is, do you have the time in your schedule to do personal and professional development to learn the principles? And maybe you have tons of time in your schedule to learn, but you've fallen behind on the business world in your area. My challenge to everyone on the call today is, which one of the two areas have you fallen behind in? And it's time to pull that area up just a little bit. Again, I'm going to answer some questions here in a few minutes. If you have any, feel free to put them in the chat, but I'm just going to finish my conclusion here. Best practices and professional and personal development is breathing in and breathing out. I believe personal and professional development is very applicable when it comes to breathing in. You're taking in principles. You're getting the most important things into you. You're becoming better. You're learning the principles that all the best practices are founded on, so that when a company like iSeek, I'm going to speak about this in a second, they simply walk in and go, hey, where's the blind spots? Is the blind spot in the personal and professional development or best practice? Where's the blind spot? So when we ask which one of the two is more important, I hope the question seems a little silly now, because let me ask you this: which one's more important, breathing in or breathing out? When's the last time you tried to stop one or the other? Because what I'll tell you is a lot of sicknesses in the world happen when one of those two aren't working correctly. Maybe that's a light bulb moment. Maybe that's the emoji with the head blowing up. Maybe, perhaps, there's a sickness in your organization because you've either stopped breathing in enough, or perhaps you've stopped breathing out enough. Because without both of these, the best that can happen is your business will stall. And the worst that can happen is your business might die. So this is where iSeek can help. And yes, I'm going to give a little commercial here, but there's a reason, because iSeek Solutions are experts in both of these. They have people with the letters after their name. They can really help you give a third party. There's actually an example that I'm going to give here, because I wish I have a wonderful marriage, and my wife and I do some marriage counseling, but I wish that every husband and wife in America would intentionally spend time going through marriage counseling and going to marriage conferences. In fact, my wife and I, not even 2 months ago, went to a marriage conference at our church. Why? Because we're struggling? No, because you can always do better. Having a third party come in from a marriage standpoint and give an outside perspective is sometimes the one key to moving from a good marriage to a great marriage. So here's the idea. iSeek Solutions is an outside perspective. They're a group of consultants that can help you move your business from good to great. So in closing, let me give you something practical to walk away with that you can implement tomorrow morning. Stephen Covey describes a time management principle in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that we should all apply. Here's the principle. Instead of prioritizing what is already on your schedule, we should schedule the priorities that are most important to us and our enterprise. Here's what that means. Instead of our schedules filling up with everybody else's priorities, we should all look at our schedule for tomorrow. Today is Wednesday, August the 25th. Tomorrow, Thursday, August 26th. We should look at our schedule and say, what are the most important things in these 2 areas for me and my enterprise? And let me place those on the schedule, and everybody else has to work around my priorities. Many times what we do is our schedule just fills up with whoever's loudest. It tends to fill up with a lot of this. A lot of times there was a conference, I believe it was Stephen Covey, that he was at, and he asked, are books important? And everybody in the room raised their hand. He said, how many of you are actively reading? And 90% of the hands went down. And he said, why is that? And a gentleman from the back of the room said, books don't ring. It's because the priorities that are most important in our lives and our businesses are very often not screaming at us. They're sitting in a corner and saying, I'm waiting here for you to prioritize me in your schedule. That's the practical thing. Schedule time for breathing in with personal and professional development. Schedule time for breathing out, applying best practices. And when you learn how to breathe in and breathe out in your business, you'll discover this war doesn't even exist. It's just 2 sides of the same coin. So thank you for tuning into our webinar today. Marche, do we have any questions at all in the chat? And again, this was a very simple idea, so maybe there's not going to be any questions, and that's okay. It doesn't appear that there are any questions or comments at all. This is what I'd like to say. I appreciate it, Marche. If there's anything that you would like clarification on, if you have any questions, I definitely encourage you to reach out to someone at iSeek Solutions or reach out to myself. I'll give you my phone number and my email, since I had it on a slide that doesn't work right now. My phone number is 334-375-0062. And my email address is cc, like Chris Craft, Life Leadership. It's the company I represent, cclifeleadership@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out to me or someone at iSeek. Thank you for tuning into this webinar. You are going to receive a follow through from iSeek Solutions, everyone on the call, just to see what you thought, see if you have any recommendations, and see if they can help you and your business. And please reach out and connect with me. Whether for speaking engagements or just to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn. And I'd love to connect with you and network. Networking with people is what COVID has taught me. The importance of relationships, both business and personal, in our lives. And that's part of that personal and professional development side. So thank you for tuning in. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and we look forward to hearing from you. And please reach out to iSeek Solutions at your earliest convenience. We'll see you next time.